Hello again, and welcome to Season 0, Episode 2 of the History of the Disc Golf Pro Tour here on Disc Golf Daily. As we wrapped up last week with Steve talking through his history in disc golf and the ideas surrounding the creation of the Pro Tour, we now move into taking that idea into reality. So in part 2 of our interview with Steve Dodge, we begin to hear the groundwork being laid for the start of the 2016 season and the start of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. So with that being said, let's get into it and hear from Steve Dodge. Okay, this is an idea to reality.
I remember. I'm getting little goosebumps. I from my memory, it was a phone call with Nate. It might have been a phone call with Nate and Jeff. But I remember Nate being the one that said, "Hey, Steve, just do it," and we've got your back. And my initial reaction was probably it feels like it was probably, oh shit. I have to really do this now. Like it's one thing to push for an idea. It's another thing to jump in and say, I'm going to do this. So that was really, really hard. But some of the things that came in very quickly. Number one, I wanted to have a festival. Number two, I wanted to have good media. Number three, I wanted to have, I wanted to look good. And number four, we needed to get partners. I had connections. And I'm doing all this while continuing to be the head of Vibram Disc Golf. And so, number one, I have a full-time job, but number two, I have a full-time job who is a direct competitor with the people that I'm asking to sponsor this thing that I'm just going to create. So regarding the media, Joe Canale and I went to, so the event, we're going to start in June at the Vibram Open. Joe Canale and I went down to the memorial and we rented a suite and we slept in one room and we set up a studio in the other room. And we invited as many pros as we could to come sit in that studio and be interviewed for the Pro Tour. And Joe Canale is I think he's still with the Pro Tour. But he's a very good editor. He's a very good interviewer. He was a one-man wrecking crew making all of those initial videos. And actually, if you go to DGN and you go to somewhere on DGN, there's some old school ads that he created that are still there. And because they were quality. And so anyway, back in the day, like that's how we set up the media. Talked with Terry and Johnny and agreed, I would give them 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches if they would agree to cover the live cover of all of these events, and they said make it 3, and we did. I'm kidding, it stayed at 2. And then talked with met Matt Kruger at UDisc in probably the fall. I feel like it was the fall of 2015. And I said, hey, do you think you could upgrade this to be a live scoring app where you could actually show the scores? Maybe we could keep some statistics. And talked with him, met Josh. We all got on the phone and came up with the idea of Circle 2. And then one of us came up with Circle 3. It might have been me, and Josh and Matt said that's too much. I still think there should be a Circle 3. 100 feet is like a perfect size. It just feels good to me. But anyway, we're not there yet. And then, and basically just put talk to Miles from Paragon about putting together all of making us look good, basically, the feather banners, the tents, the signage, all that stuff. And Miles, he might have come up with the idea of the coroplast walls that line the fairways, even again to this day. And wow, it's a relatively inexpensive thing to make, but the value, the pop of that is huge. And then I had connections with all of the manufacturers at the time. And, I called up Innova, I called up DGA, I called up Discraft, I called up Daredevil discs up in Canada, Vibram, and then maybe Legacy. Legacy would have been the sixth. So those were the initial 6 manufacturer sponsors. I think they all put in $10,000 and maybe 100 or 200 discs, and we got going. As far as raising money, I put in a bunch of money, and then talked to a friend of mine named Pete Johnson, who got his dad on the phone. His dad has a stake. I'm going to embarrass myself now. I don't know which Johnson company it is. It's either Johnson and Johnson or the Johnson Company, but one of those two. And we should cut that out. It's embarrassing. It's never been, and it was never a part of any of this. It was just that's where the money's coming from. But Jim Johnson listened to my proposal, asking him for, I think I asked for $100,000, and he said 2 things. He said, number one, are you putting in any money? And I said, yes, I think I put in 180,000. And then he said, I'm going to do this, but not because I ever expect to see a return on this money. I believe in you and what you're building. And from what I understand, Jim is not a disc golfer. Pete is. But Jim just said, this guy's going to try to do something that he's really passionate about, and I want to be a part of it. So yeah, that's, and then Sean Jack, I talked to Sean Jack. He's actually the first person I told outside of Nate and Jeff, about the idea and that we were doing it. And I asked him if he would be, do the, be the guy that developed partnerships. And I heard him tell somebody that the first 2 years were basically volunteer, and he's kind of wrong on that, because I would have said it was the first 4 years. But and after 4 years, when I'll say DGPT 2.0 was developed, Sean finally got a small percentage of what he should have earned, just like all of us.
Yeah. So you talk about, I guess actually just as a small side note for people who aren't aware, Sean, while Sean is currently in California, is known for the OTB Open. Sean came from Massachusetts, and so that's where sort of the connection with Sean comes from, and it's really cool actually to see as people sort of spread across the country. I was talking actually with Nate Heinold about this earlier, in that his tournament staff comes from all different parts of the country, but the important part is that they're all invested in disc golf. And that's one of the things that people, I think, don't necessarily see is in the behind the scenes area is actually how few people there are still. I think that it's not from an insular nature of anything. It's just that there's a very committed crew of people who are out there wanting to see the professional side of the sport succeed.
Yeah.
And to your point, Joe Canale on media, he's still the guy behind all of the ESPN broadcasts that the Pro Tour does. Miles Parkhill, still the guy behind all of the course assets that the Disc Golf Pro Tour has, and much of the apparel that the Pro Tour is creating. And then Johnny and Terry, still Terry behind the microphone and Johnny behind the switchboard, helping run these events. And so it's not like, as the Pro Tour's grown, sure, we've gotten more resources. People are actually getting paid to do this. They're not doing it, on the side, but it's all still the same people, sort of on the back end. So with all of that,
now, Seth, can you remember your next question? Because I want to. There was one part of that I forgot.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
And the one part of that I forgot was the development of the festival, which was really important to me personally. I wanted it to be something where families could come and have fun. And so I went down to Virginia and I talked to my friend Jason Gallant, who is he's a carpenter. He does reconstruction of houses. And I told him what I wanted to build, and he said, "Steve, you're crazy." And I said, "Yeah, but I do want to do this." And he put together all of those fronts of all of he figured out a way to connect plywood to make a plywood frame that looks like an old, like Dodge City, an old Western, and connect it to a baseball net, and that's how Dodge City got created. And then Miles connected me with Dustin, Zoe, Shasta, and Paul. Dustin Keegan, Zoe Andike, Paul Oman, and Shasta Chris. And I got my sister's RV, my brother-in-law and sister's RV, and I put them in it. We bought a little trailer, actually a decent sized trailer, and they traveled around that trailer. The festival was in the back, and they set up the festival at every tournament, and then broke it down. And then when we got to GMC, we burned it because that was what needed to happen. And it was a very cathartic experience sitting around that campfire with that team, burning the festival one piece at a time, and just saying that was amazing. I can't believe we did that.
Yeah, so that actually was going to be my next question. We got the events, but then there's the festival side of it that was birthed out of things. One just sort of small question, was it always going to be Dodge City, or was that like something that also came out of just the way that it all looked and the creation?
I always wanted it to be like an old Western town. We had 6 stations all lined up. We had Dis-Tac-Toe, and then the Silly Pint Knockdown, and then there was like a Plinko game and a radar gun and a couple of other things. I don't even remember what. The swinging basket. There was all sorts of stuff. It was great. But it needed to have a facade. And whenever I think of facade, I just think of the old Westerns. Because that in my mind is what those were. Those were all facades. And so I just came up with the idea of a Western facade. Dodge City was something that developed just because my last name's Dodge, and someone said, "Hey, look, there's Dodge City." And it kind of stuck. It didn't really stick very much. But now it's how I think of it. So, that was by no means was that on purpose.
Yeah, and so for people who aren't fully aware, you talk about how you got to the end of the season, you burned the facade. The festival of the Flying Disc was something that existed on the Pro Tour from 2016 really until 2019.
Yeah.
It just evolved over time.
Right.
And I think that it was a really first iteration of what it looked like to have a spectator experience beyond just the competitive golf. And so talk us through sort of like your idea, besides like, hey, this is something that can appeal to families. I know like originally, and it sounds like maybe one of these is coming back this year for the MVP Open. Originally, you also like promoted, hey, we're going to try to have bouncy houses and face painting and those sorts of things at events. What was it that sort of sparked that idea that you needed more than just the media and the courses and the pros?
Well, you need spectators. That without the spectators, nothing's going to work. And ironically, without the courses, nothing. Without the pros, nothing's going to work. Without the media, nothing. It all has to work together, which is actually one of the things that makes it very hard because, like the spectators want to be entertained, the players want to be paid, the media wants to be paid. Everybody has a slightly different angle, and trying to get all those angles to work right wasn't always easy. So in order to make it engaging for spectators, in my opinion, there's a lot of downtime in disc golf. If the women finish at 1 and the lead card doesn't go off till 3, what do I do for that 2 hours? And how am I entertained? And so we came up with Dodge City, and we did actually have 2 bouncy houses, and I pity the kids that got on those because it was 90 some degrees. There was no shade, and one of the bouncy houses was black. And just when you touched it, it was like you would burn. Like it was horrible. But I do remember seeing a few kids in the bouncy house, and I was like, okay, this clearly wasn't worth it. But maybe if it was in the shade, like it's all a learning experience. But the goal was and is to make it as entertaining as possible for spectators. And whether you're a spectator at home, and I remember working with Terry and Johnny and trying really hard to cover the women somehow, and then trying to cover the second card somehow. And you don't have any resources, so you have to figure out how to make things engaging. And so that was why that happened, was to make sure the spectators had a good time and stuck around.
So to get a little bit more into sort of that build up and launch, you start planning. You're starting to get all of these pieces together, whether it be Miles or Johnny and Terry, Sean, etc. What helped you sort of set the dates? Were you still working in the same world where the dates were already set and you were just working with them? Like, what sort of determined where those dates fell? Because it sort of does feel a little fortuitous for those who aren't aware that it started in June, ended in September, August, and so it was very short, but it also came in the second part of the year where you have more time, I guess, to sort of build.
Correct. Yeah, we needed the time to get ready. And the Vibram Open was already a national tour event and became a Pro Tour event also. And I actually think to this day, I think it was the only national tour Pro Tour event. And if you basically, it was pretty easy to pick the dates because the national tour existed and we just had to fit in between their dates. And so that's what we did. And in fact, as we expanded in 2017 and 2018, I'll just say the PDJ was not always forthcoming in discussing dates with the Pro Tour in those early days. So the Pro Tour, we would, as far as the PDGA was concerned, we were just A-tier events. And I say just 8 tiers, but we were A-tiers. And so the national tour got to go first, and then the Pro Tour got to go second. And the Pro Tour had to try to make a schedule that was geographically sensible, but didn't completely contradict the national tour. And our dates were very limited because all the national tour dates were already done. I think they actually gave us sort of A+ versions, because I think they gave us first choice of A tiers. But we didn't coordinate with the national tour dates, which is what I always wanted, and I felt like we needed. But yeah, as far as picking the dates goes, it was pretty easy. There were only dates, like there were dates we couldn't go, and we went from June to August, so the dates just kind of filled right in. Although I will say I did want to go every other week. I felt it was important. I actually think it's still important to give the players time off. If their bodies are breaking down, they need to recover.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's one of the things that you see sort of as a shift as the Pro Tour goes from 1.0 to 2.0, of the increase of back-to-back events and even the lack of time off between majors, which I think is also it's important just as much. So as you're building into this, you've gotten the back end people ready to go. What did it look like to start to get the professionals on board as well?
Well, the Vibram Open was a national tour event, so it was pretty easy. And back in 2016, there were probably 8 MPO players that were touring and 2 FPO players. Like, it was not a lot. I can think. Well, I could actually go up there and look. It was Des Redding, who was touring with Jay, and probably Valerie Jenkins, who was probably touring with Avery and or Nate. And then the rest of the people were regional pros. As far as the women, on the men's side, there were probably a handful of other people that quote toured. So it didn't take a lot to get those 6 or 7 people to commit. I will say one of my favorite stories is a guy named Curtis Manahan, someone that I expect very few people outside of his family have heard of in disc golf. He came to the Vibram Open, and then I saw him again at Silver Cup, and he probably got like 40th or 20. I have no idea. But I was just talking to him, and he said, "Hey, just so you know, I'm playing all of these events, and my goal is to make that tour championship." And I was like, "Well, who are you? Where are you from?" And he was just like a 980, 990 golfer who was just like, "This is my one shot." And it made me so happy when he made the tour championship on the lower half. He was by no means one of the top guys. Um, but I still have his trading card. Like, his trading card is one of the most important trading cards to me, because he bought into the idea. He saw what we were trying to create, and he said, if this works, I want to be on that. I want to be able to tell my kids I played on the Disc Golf Pro Tour, and they're like, wait, what? And so I'm going to tear up. That was so fun for me. But anyway, we had a lot of players played many events for the purposes of trying to get to the tour championship. Oh, actually, that would be the fifth tenet, is the existence of a tour championship. The national tour just had a points thing, and then at the end they'd give someone a check for $8 and say thank you. I thought it was important to have a tour championship, and we made first place. I think we made first place at the tour championship, $10,000, which at the time was a very big payout. And so that encouraged people to really try to qualify for the tour championship.
So you mentioned something that I don't even think I was planning on touching on today, but I do want to address it and sort of get a little bit more insight into it. You mentioned the trading cards.
Yeah.
Right? And so now trading cards, people who follow the professional side of the sport, they're very well aware of them. We actually have multiple trading card manufacturers, but the first iteration of like large scale production of trading cards came with the Pro Tour. And so, what was in disc golf, at least?
Yeah.
So, what was your idea behind that? How did those sort of come about as something that you saw to be a product that should be created?
Well, trading. I grew up in the '80s, and trading cards were an important part of my life. Football trading cards, baseball trading cards. They might have hockey and soccer, I don't know. But and so if we were going to be a legitimate sport, a professional sport, a sport that people would look at and respect, I felt like trading cards were an important part of that. Kids get trading cards, and those people on those trading cards are cool. If you want someone to play a sport, show them that cool people play that sport. So you have to make, and the DGPT 2.0 is doing this perfectly. You have to make these people special when they come to town. And actually, to say, I remember meeting Isaac Robinson a couple years ago in the parking lot. I was telling all the players to move their vans to park, do a better job of parking. And, he just pops out of the van. I was like, hey, you're Isaac Robinson. And I had a moment of forgetting who I was 100% and just being like, I see you on TV. Like, I'm happy that I'm talking. Like, I was a little kid, and I can't imagine how little kids feel if I feel that way. So it's really important that these players be seen as special and cool, because they're going to inspire kids to play disc golf and say, no, I don't want to play soccer. I want to play disc golf because Ricky Wysocki plays disc golf and Simon Lizotte plays disc golf. And even better now, and Kristen Tatar and Haiti Lena, and you have Paige, and you have Missy, and you have Own. Like, there's so many women now who are stars. It's super exciting, because I can't wait to watch the women's side of the game blow up the same way the men's has in probably 5 years.
Yeah, I think you and I were just actually talking about that last week. How at the first Pro Tour events on the FPO side, we were lucky if there were 12 to 15 FPO players, and now we can pretty much name the top 50 in tour standings, and the field size is capped at 52, and there's a wait list.
Yeah.
It's amazing to really see how much that has grown. So you've gathered all of the people, you've set the dates. You did most of that while working at Vibram. When was it that you decided you were going to transition from being at Vibram to Pro Tour full time? And how did making that decision go?
I pretty much always knew that it's kind of funny thinking about running Vibram disc golf and the Pro Tour simultaneously. Like, by the way, guys, I'm going to take three vacation days because I have to go to Minnesota and run a tournament there that's sponsored by Prodigy or whoever it was sponsored by. Um, I don't know. To this day, I don't know what their thoughts were on what I was doing. I don't know even if they knew what I was doing. Um, but I knew that after the 2016 season, if it was even mildly successful, I wouldn't be able to stay at Vibram, and and that was the goal. Um, having said all that, I love Vibram. When I see a pair of shoes with a Vibram sole, I know that they're quality. I know they've been tested. I know that they're going to do whatever they were designed to do very, very well. I would actually encourage Ideo Shoes to go to Vibram and say, here's what we're trying to do with these shoes. Can you make them better? Because the answer is going to be yes. That's what they do. Tell them what you want a shoe sole to do, and they'll do it. Um, and so, I mean, I've come to understand how Vibram works more than I ever. All right, now we're back. Anyway, I don't want anybody to think that I don't respect Vibram. I think there was somebody that worked at Vibram that didn't think that I would be able to do my job if I was in two locations. But the company itself is fantastic and does great work. And I have positive relationships with a lot of the people there still. But anyway, I knew after after that 2016 season, if we were going to do another season, there's no way I could stay at Vibram. So that at the end of the 2016 season, I gave them I think it was 3 or 4 months notice, and we used that time to try to find somebody, and then I used that time to try to find somebody and make the 2017 season even bigger.
Awesome. So we've talked through a lot of different avenues and aspects of how the Pro Tour started to come about. This sort of season of Pro Tour history, I'm effectively referring to as season zero. So you're just sort of talking to all of the people who helped bring it together. What sort of parts of that story do you feel like maybe we haven't talked about today that you would like to highlight?
Season zero. I like that name, by the way. That's a perfect name for trying to get things ready. I feel like we touched on a lot of it. I'm sure when I hang up, I will think of more. Um, oh, Pat Govang is someone we haven't mentioned. So Pat Govang, I think, is one of the original architects of the national tour, actually. But from my perspective, like we all have people in our lives when, like, if I'm having trouble in my soul, I'll call my brother. If I'm having trouble with other stuff, I'll call my old roommate from college. And if I'm, and so we all have these people in our lives, or if you don't, please develop them. For me, Pat Govang is my. We're talking about money that has more zeros than I'm used to. I got to go talk to Pat. And Pat Govang is the guy that helped me walk through how all of this financing can work. And so he was an instrumental part, and God bless him for taking all of the time he did to answer the questions of a layman with patience and dumbing it down enough so I understood. Another important person would be Tim Carter. And this is someone who probably very few people outside of New England disc golf know. But Tim Carter is I'll just say a high-end corporate lawyer. And he's the guy that helped develop he helped make Disc Golf USA, which was the parent LLC to DGPT. He helped make that a reality. Actually, I have, if you can see the red and white striped disc over there, that has the signatures of him and me and the other two attorneys that like we signed it, and okay, now this is a thing that exists. And it's kind of funny because without Tim Carter, I probably would have found another lawyer, but I wouldn't have had the trust that I had. And I guess that's what all this is. I knew everybody that I worked with and I trusted them implicitly. Miles, can you please create a logo and a tent with that logo on it? And Miles was like, yeah, we can do that. And Miles, can you invent an elevated basket that I can put advertising on? Sure, we can do that. And yeah. So just everybody that was a part of the Pro Tour was a friend and was someone that I trusted implicitly to do anything that needed to be done. And they all did it, and somehow it came together and worked.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place for us to sort of wrap this introduction to the season 0 of the Pro Tour. I really appreciate your maybe not so good memory, but good memory of how things were started. I think it's, for me, the reason why I'm invested in this project is I really want to make sure that we don't lose all of those stories. We don't lose the background as things continue to grow. I think one of the things we found sort of in the telling of history, the annals of history, is that if we have the opportunity to record it all while we still remember it and record it all as it's happening, we're much better for it. And so I'm looking forward to this journey that we're embarking on as we go to tell all of the other seasons of the tour, and continue to work to catch up to the current iteration of the tour, because I think that people who don't know about the early days are going to be really sort of surprised at how everything came together and were pulled off. So thank you for your time today, Steve, and look forward to talking to you again on the next one. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Steve Dodge as we looked at the idea and the creation of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Next week, we'll be talking with Steve Dodge's brother and mother, two of the people centered and integral behind the creation of the Disc Golf Pro Tour and really the creation of who Steve is as a person. And so we'll get to hear lots of great stories about his childhood and what created the man that we know today, and really what ultimately came of the Pro Tour and some of their involvement in it. So if you haven't already, please make sure to share this podcast with a friend. And if you're not already following us on Facebook, Twitter, or the rest of the social platforms, make sure to do that too. And so until then, have a great weekend, get out and play some disc golf, and we'll catch you here next week.
Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really does help us grow.